The morning sun cast a gentle glow across the courtyard as I sat there reading the newspaper. It had been 10 days since I had moved into my uncle's house. Normally, he spent most of his time abroad, and during those periods, I would stay at his place to look after things. But this time, the circumstances were different. My uncle had recently undergone eye surgery, and his doctors had advised him to keep his eyes bandaged for at least 20 days. During this time, he wouldn't be able to manage the household or even see anything around him. That's why he had asked me to be present, not just to keep him company, but to manage everything in his absence from sight. He also had a young wife, someone I had never met before. That's what made this request a little more unusual. My uncle mentioned it casually over the phone, saying he'd appreciate my help since his wife was still quite new to the responsibilities of running a home. I agreed without much thought, not realizing how complex things were about to become. If I had even the faintest idea of what lay ahead, I might have never said yes. That morning, as I flipped through the newspaper, my phone rang. It was my uncle. He told me he was right outside the front door. I quickly got up and went to open it, and that's when I saw her, standing next to him. She was his wife, 16 years old. And I had never seen anyone like her in my life. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My eyes locked on her, and everything else around me disappeared. Her beauty was overwhelming, so much so that I felt something stir within me I couldn't quite name. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic, a presence so strong that it felt dangerous. I didn't know what unsettled me more, her physical appearance or the strange intensity in her eyes. My uncle kept calling my name, but I was caught in a daze, distracted by the young woman who stood beside him. It was clear from the way she looked at me, direct, unblinking, that she had noticed my reaction. And something about the way she smiled made me feel uneasy. Her gaze wasn't innocent. There was something deeper there, something unreadable. Shaking off the moment, I finally helped my uncle inside. As I supported him by the arm and guided him through the living room, I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I turned my head slightly, and there she was, smiling again, this time even more deliberately. Her expression carried a silent message, one that I didn't want to understand. I tried not to respond, tried to keep my mind clear, but even in those early moments, I sensed it. This was going to be no ordinary stay. I had only agreed to help a recovering uncle, but what I had stepped into was a storm waiting to happen. I had just helped my uncle into the lounge and was about to excuse myself when I heard her voice for the first time. It was soft but assertive. "Arsalan, can you show me where the kitchen supplies are kept?" she called out casually from down the hallway. The sound of my name spoken by her startled me. She knew my name. I hadn't introduced myself, and my uncle hadn't mentioned it in her presence, at least not that I could recall. The realization sent a faint chill down my spine. Still, I composed myself and walked slowly toward the kitchen. The moment I reached the doorway, I froze. She was standing there, barefoot, dressed in a revealing outfit that was impossible to ignore. The air seemed to change around her. It was as if she had been waiting, posing even. My eyes instinctively dropped to the floor, but my heart was racing. I wanted to turn away, but my feet wouldn't move. My conscience screamed at me to leave, yet something stronger, something primal, urged me to stay. Then came her voice again, calm, measured. "Why are you just standing there? Come in and tell me where the supplies are." Her tone wasn't impatient, it was knowing. Like she already understood the effect she had on me, and she was enjoying it. I kept my eyes low and walked inside, pointing vaguely to the cupboard on the left. As I turned to leave, I felt her hand on my shoulder again, firm this time. The contact made my entire body tense. I pulled away quickly and took a step back. She giggled softly, not embarrassed, not hesitant, only amused. "I didn't think you'd be this decent," she said, her eyes narrowed in curiosity. "From what I've heard, you're not exactly the type who lets girls slip away, isn't that right?" I looked at her, stunned. My mouth went dry. She began listing things, details about my past, about girls I had dated or flirted with, even things I hadn't told anyone but a few close friends. She knew it all. "Don't be so shocked," she said with a smirk. "It's not that hard to find things out. You just need to know where to look." I stood there, silent, heart pounding. Her smile widened and she winked at me. That's when I realized this girl wasn't just young. She was manipulative, bold, and far too intelligent for her age. She wasn't innocent, she was dangerous. In that moment, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about temptation anymore. It was a test, one I wasn't sure I was strong enough to pass. I decided then and there I had to keep my distance. For my uncle's sake, for my own, because one wrong move and everything could spiral into something I could never take back. I took a deep breath, trying to gather myself. Her words echoed in my head, each one weighing heavier than the last. How did she know so much about me? I had never spoken to her before, never met her. And yet she spoke as if she had known me for years, like she had studied me. As I turned to leave, her voice came again, softer this time. Wait. Aren't you going to show me exactly where the things are? I hesitated. She was pushing me, drawing me in with a mix of innocence and confidence that didn't belong to someone her age. Reluctantly, I pointed again, explaining where things were kept. She stepped closer, too close, and placed her hand back on my shoulder. This time I pulled away more sharply. Please don't do that, I said, trying to sound firm. She tilted her head and gave me a strange smile. Why not? Are you scared of me? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned around and started to walk away. Before I could get far, I heard her whisper behind me, You're not like what I imagined. I thought you'd be more, entertaining. I didn't respond, but her words stung in a way I couldn't explain. I returned to the lounge only to find my uncle sitting quietly with his eyes bandaged, completely unaware of what had just taken place. I wanted to tell him something. Anything. But how could I? How do you explain that the young woman he trusted was playing games? And then, as if on cue, he spoke. Arsalan, he said gently. She's been wanting to visit the farmhouse for days. It's all she talks about. Would you mind taking her? I froze. She's been excited ever since I showed her the photos. You know how beautiful the area is. She'll enjoy it. And I'd feel more at ease if she went with someone I trust. My throat tightened. I couldn't even look at him. His trust felt heavier than ever. I glanced toward the hallway. She was standing there already, as if she'd been waiting. Our eyes met and she smiled again. That same smile, mysterious, confident, unreadable. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed to say no. But how could I explain without hurting my uncle? Without sounding paranoid or worse, disrespectful? He spoke again, gently but firmly. You two go. I'm exhausted. I'll just rest here. She walked closer and casually wrapped her hand around my arm. Come on, we're getting late, she said sweetly, but with a pressure in her grip that betrayed her tone. I looked back at my uncle. His back was turned toward us. He couldn't see us. He had no idea. Her hand still on my arm, I felt trapped, not just by her, but by my silence. As we stepped outside, her grip tightened around my arm. It wasn't playful or gentle, it was possessive. I instinctively pulled away and turned to her, trying to keep my tone measured. Please, I said, don't behave like this. She paused, watching me with wide eyes, almost as if offended. But the offense quickly melted into something else, something darker. A strange smile curved her lips, not of amusement, but of defiance. Are you always this serious? She asked quietly. You act like I'm committing a crime. I don't think you understand, I said, my voice low. See, this isn't a game. You're my uncle's wife. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she looked away as if bored. Your uncle, she repeated under her breath, then laughed softly. So what? I turned and walked ahead of her, trying to keep my mind focused. This wasn't the time for conversation, and certainly not the kind she seemed eager to have. My thoughts were clouded, my body tense. I just wanted this trip to be over before anything else spiraled out of control. The car ride was quiet at first, but halfway through the drive, she leaned her head back and sighed. You know, she said slowly, I always thought men were stronger than this. I didn't expect you to be so hesitant. I kept my eyes on the road. It's not hesitation, I replied. It's respect. Something you clearly don't understand. She scoffed. Respect? That's a word people use when they're afraid to admit what they really want. I didn't respond. There was no point arguing. She was too far down a path I wasn't willing to follow. She leaned toward me, closer than was comfortable. You're not as boring as you pretend to be, she whispered. I can see it in your eyes. I clenched the steering wheel, resisting every urge to react. That's when the car suddenly jolted. I pulled over quickly to the side of the road. Something was wrong. The engine sputtered and died. Great, just what I needed. She groaned beside me. Is this some kind of trick? Are you trying to impress me with roadside drama? I'm not playing games, I snapped. The car's actually broken down. We both stepped out. I checked the hood, hoping it was something minor. Meanwhile, she stood beside me, arms folded, irritation growing by the second. You're wasting my time, she said flatly. I ignored her, trying to stay calm. After some effort, I managed to get the car running again. We got back on the road, the silence heavier than before. As we neared the farmhouse, dark clouds loomed ahead. Rain began falling hard and fast, turning the road into a glistening trail. She looked out the window, then back at me with a mischievous glint. Looks like nature's on our side, she whispered. I didn't reply. But something inside me knew. This wasn't over. The real storm was only just beginning. The rain intensified as we arrived at the farmhouse, drumming loudly against the car's roof. The sky had darkened into a heavy gray, casting the entire landscape in a gloomy hue. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the ignition. For a moment, we just sat in silence, listening to the sound of water pelting the windshield. She turned to me with a satisfied look. It's like the world wants us to be alone, she said softly. I didn't answer. We stepped out of the car, huddled beneath the porch awning to shield ourselves from the downpour. Before I could unlock the front door, she placed her hand on my arm again, lightly this time, almost delicately. You don't need to fight it, she said. No one is going to find out. Your uncle won't know. He trusts you blindly. Her words hit me like a slap. The weight of that trust, the guilt, and the shame all collided inside me at once. Don't say that, I replied quietly, Chen. Just don't. She smiled, unbothered, as if my resistance only entertained her more. Then just as I reached for the door, I heard voices, familiar ones. I froze. Turning around, I saw several cars parked behind us. People were getting out, laughing, greeting each other, umbrellas in hand, and then, as if the world had shifted beneath my feet, I saw my grandmother approaching with a wide smile. There you two are, she exclaimed. What took you so long? I couldn't speak. My heart pounded in my chest. I glanced at the girl beside me. Her name was Sonia, and her face had gone pale. I struggled to understand what was happening. My uncle's entire family was here, cousins, aunts, uncles. It was as if a secret reunion had been planned, and no one had thought to mention it. Sonia quickly stepped back, her posture stiff and unnatural. Her smile from earlier was gone, replaced by an expression that wavered between shock and fury. I looked at her again, and she refused to meet my gaze. My grandmother came closer and touched my shoulder. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? I forced a shaky smile. I just didn't expect anyone to be here. Well, she said, chuckling, we thought we'd surprise everyone. And it looks like we did. I glanced back at Sonia again. She stood still, blinking, as if she didn't know whether to scream or run. For a moment, I wondered if someone had overheard our conversation outside, but everyone seemed cheerful, unaware. Relieved but still uneasy, I led them all inside. But Sonia was no longer herself. She snapped at people, responded curtly, and ignored every effort to calm her down. My grandmother pulled me aside and whispered, What's wrong with her? Why is she acting like this? I looked away. How could I tell her the truth? Because the truth was too twisted for this place. Too heavy for this family. I stood there, caught between the warmth of my family's greetings and the cold weight of Sonia's behavior. She wasn't just irritated, she was unraveling, snapping at anyone who asked simple questions, brushing past relatives with complete disregard, speaking in a tone far too sharp for a guest, let alone someone newly married into the family. Everyone noticed. Whispers started. My grandmother narrowed her eyes and leaned in again. What exactly is going on with her? She asked, her voice lowered, as if trying to be discreet. This is not how a girl behaves in front of her elders. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't know how. What could I say? Wondan-san, That the young woman they had welcomed into the family had just tried to seduce me moments ago? So I gave her a helpless shrug, trying to mask the storm churning inside me. But my grandmother had been watching people her whole life. She saw more than I wanted her to. She wasn't like this before, she said quietly, almost to herself. I don't like what I'm seeing in her eyes. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, nodding and slipping away from the crowd. I walked toward a far corner of the room, seeking some distance. That's when I noticed another pair of eyes watching me. Not Sonia's this time, but someone else's. A gaze far softer, hesitant. It was my cousin. When our eyes met, she looked down quickly, a shy smile appearing for only a second before she turned away. I paused, confused at first, then unexpectedly warm inside. I had known her since childhood. We had grown up playing together, yet I never really noticed her. Not like this. But her smile, that modest glance, it felt more powerful than anything Sonia had tried to provoke in me. As I stood there trying to process what I was feeling, I felt a sudden pinch on my thigh, hard and deliberate. I turned sharply. Sonia was standing beside me, her eyes blazing. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her jealousy was written all over her face. I gave her a puzzled look but didn't respond. I refused to feed her fury with words, but inside I was beginning to realize something I hadn't expected. Sonia wasn't angry because she cared. She was angry because she was losing control. That night, she didn't calm down. Her behavior worsened. She slammed doors, spoke rudely to elders, and refused to join the others at dinner. People started asking questions, and every time they did, I felt a tightening in my chest. The truth pressed harder against my conscience. I went to my room hoping to escape for a while, but just as I was about to close the door, Sonia appeared again, her eyes wild, her voice firm. I want to go home, she said. Now. The storm outside was still raging, and her tone was no less violent, but this time I didn't give in. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her brows furrowed in anger. Rain lashed against the windows behind her as if nature itself reflected her state of mind. I said I want to go home, she repeated more forcefully this time. I looked past her to the front door. The wind was howling outside, the rain heavy and relentless. The roads were barely visible. Driving in that condition would be reckless. It's not safe, I replied calmly. You'll have to wait until morning. She scoffed and turned away, muttering something under her breath. I stepped inside my room and closed the door gently behind me, locking it. My heart was pounding again, not from a fear, but from restraint. I could feel myself breaking into two halves, one still clinging to reason, the other tempted by everything Sonia kept throwing my way. But something was different now. That look from my cousin was innocent, unforced. It had stirred something in me I hadn't felt in a long time, clarity. And that clarity was what I clung to as I sat on the edge of my bed trying to silence the chaos in my mind. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, I don't know. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but it didn't help. I even opened the window to let in some cold air, hoping it would shake me back to focus. Then came the knock. Not loud, not hurried, just deliberate. I stayed silent. The door handle turned gently, but the lock held. She knocked again. Arsalan, please open the door, Sonia said softly from the other side. Her voice was calm now, maybe even vulnerable. But I didn't move. I'm sorry for earlier, she added. I didn't mean to cause a scene. Still, I said nothing. After a few seconds of silence, she continued. You're not coming out because of them, right? You don't want to make things awkward in front of your family. Don't worry. When we go back home, there won't be anyone there. No interruptions, no questions, just us. You can have what you want, however you want. The words chilled me. There was no shame in her voice, no hesitation, just an open invitation to a boundary I refused to cross. I walked to the door, leaned against it, and closed my eyes. Go back to your room, I said quietly. Please. There was a long pause, and then, without another word, her footsteps faded away. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling the same question. How had things gone so far? But amidst that confusion, one thing remained clear. I was no longer falling. I was holding on. And for the first time since arriving at my uncle's home, I felt like I was doing something right. Morning light seeped weakly through the curtains, casting long gray shadows across the room. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a heavy stillness in the air, the kind that follows chaos. I hadn't slept more than a few hours, but my mind was alert, restless. A knock came again, softer this time. I opened the door slowly, expecting Sonia. But it wasn't her. It was one of my little cousins, holding a tray. "Grandmother said to give you breakfast," she mumbled and walked away. I took the tray with a quiet thank you and closed the door, my heart still heavy with everything that had transpired. Later that morning, we prepared to leave. Sonia had avoided eye contact all morning. She looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from disappointment. Her behavior had changed. No more bold glances or whispered suggestions, just silence and bitterness. We said our goodbyes to the family and got into the car. The road back home was long, but the atmosphere inside the vehicle was heavier than ever. She barely spoke. I didn't push her to. When we arrived, my uncle was resting in the lounge, his eyes still covered in bandages. Sonia greeted him with forced cheer, pretending everything was fine. I followed suit, my conscience still aching under the weight of his trust. As the evening settled in, Sonia disappeared into her room. I went to check on my uncle, who seemed more relaxed than before. He was sipping tea, eyes still bandaged. "How was the farmhouse?" he asked. "It was peaceful," I replied carefully. He nodded slowly. "She liked it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "She did." There was a long pause, and then, without lifting his head, he said something that made my blood run cold. "You didn't do anything you'll regret, did you?" I looked at him, stunned. What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking ever so slightly. He placed the cup on the side table and leaned back. "I may not have my eyes right now," he said, softly. "But I've lived long enough to know how people behave. I can sense things, even in silence." I swallowed hard. Then slowly he reached up and removed the bandage from his eyes. My breath caught in my throat. His eyes were perfectly fine. He blinked a few times and looked straight at me, calm, clear, knowing. "I needed to see the truth," he said. "And now I have." I stood frozen, unsure whether to be relieved or terrified. He smiled gently, the kind of smile that held both pain and pride. "You passed the test, Arsalan," he said. "And I'm proud of you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just nodded, overwhelmed by a mix of shame, relief, and gratitude. He looked away. But she didn't. And in that moment, I understood. Nothing had gone unnoticed. My uncle stood up slowly, adjusting his shirt cuffs as if preparing for something long overdue. His calmness unsettled me more than anger ever could. "She thought I couldn't see her," he said quietly. "But I saw everything." I lowered my gaze, unable to hold his. "I didn't know you were watching." "I wasn't watching you," he replied. "I was watching her." A painful silence followed. "I married her out of hope," he continued, voice steady. "I thought I could offer her a better life. But when a woman uses her beauty as a weapon and her youth to manipulate, that's not a wife. That's a danger." He walked past me toward the hallway. "She'll leave tonight. I've made my decision." I stood there stunned. 1,000 emotions ran through me. Part of me wanted to say something in her defense, to believe there was more to her than what we had seen. But another part of me knew. She had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. That evening, he called her into the living room. She came down hesitantly, sensing something was wrong. He spoke to her with dignity, without shouting, without insult. He told her what he had seen, how he had tested her, and how she had failed, not just as a wife, but as a person. She didn't cry. She didn't even try to deny it. She simply looked at me once, and for the first time since we met, her eyes held no confidence. Only defeat. By nightfall, she was gone, and I too was left with the weight of what almost happened. But I hadn't fallen. I had stepped back in time. And somehow that made all the difference. The house felt quieter after she left. Not empty, just peaceful. It was as though a heavy presence had been lifted. My uncle didn't speak much for the next few days, but in the silence between us, there was understanding. Trust, once shaken, had been restored. I often found myself reflecting on what had happened, not just her actions, but mine. I had stood on the edge of something irreversible, tempted more than once to fall, but somehow something within me had held me back. Perhaps it was conscience, perhaps it was fear, or maybe it was something even deeper. A voice that reminded me who I really was. What I didn't expect was what came next. My grandmother approached me one evening, smiling warmly. "You know," she said, "your cousin has always had a soft spot for you." I looked up, surprised. "Really?" she nodded. "And after what I saw during the farmhouse visit, I think it's time we talk seriously." A few weeks later, I was engaged to the very cousin whose gentle eyes had pulled me back from a dangerous path. Her kindness, her modesty, and the honesty in her smile made me realize how real love feels nothing like temptation. Today we are married. She brings peace to my life, boss, not chaos. And when I look at her, I don't feel guilt or confusion. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I walked away from the fire. Gratitude that I didn't let a moment of weakness destroy a lifetime of dignity. And most of all, gratitude that I chose the harder path, the right one. Because in the end, that choice gave me everything I never knew I was missing. A clear heart, a clean soul, and a life I can live without regret.